Hi, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to show you some of the pictures in a sketchbook which I began in 2023. I was given for Christmas. I'm not going to say too much about the sketches because you don't want to listen to me blathering on, to be honest with you. Most of them are inspired either by Old London, which I grew up in London, and I'm very interested in old photos of London and use them as references a lot of the time. For example, this one of Temple Bar before it was demolished in the 1870s. Some of them have got a connection with my family history, and some of them I just like the subject matter. Each sketch does have just a little bit of information at the bottom of it, and I do mean a little bit. That has a family history connection. Hammersmith Bridge has a very macabre one. A great-great-great-grandfather of mine had a heart attack and died on it. But enough of such morbid things. Okay, you can see lots of Victorian professions or occupations there. Most of my pictures are made with fineliner pen, usually with a nib no more than 0.3 millimeters, and sometimes as small as 0.05 millimeters. I work in monochrome mostly, not because there's anything clever about it, but because I don't really get colour. I'm not very good at using colour at all. Whereas monochrome, light and shade, I can usually do something decent. Okay. That's the famous pagoda in Kew Gardens. I do sketch from life, and I enjoy it too, but you are at the mercy of the weather when you do that. Also, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to go back in time to Old Victoria Station and draw it on the site. Moving on now. That's Puffing Billy, world's oldest steam locomotive. It's only slightly older, and we're talking weeks and months, than its sister locomotive, which also survives. It's called Wylam Dilly, and it's in the National Museum of Scotland, which is well worth a visit. The Dustman picture here was inspired by my great-great-grandfather, who sadly died of pneumonia at the age of 29, and he was a dustman in Hammersmith. This is Dundee, maybe around about the time that my grandfather, Thomas Clark, left for London in order to find work in the Great Depression. That's the town of Ypres in Belgium after the Battle of Passchendaele, in which my great-grandfather was killed. Now, that's a tailor's shop because some of my ancestors were tailors in Windsor. So if it will just let me move on. Okay, I'm a teacher myself, but also my great-great-grandfather was at one time a headmaster of a village school in Sussex. Now that's a not very good copy of a cartoon which was made by my great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was an artist and engraver. Now I made this one on holiday in Bucharest in February. And this was actually made out in the open air. And it wasn't a very cold day, but I was absolutely frozen when I finished it. Ditto this one as well. Sorry, I've got a thing about transport. I love trains and I love trams. Now, these are stokers in a steamship, which is what another ancestor of mine did. And there we are, old London town, Fleet Street. I remember that railway viaduct there, but it was actually removed in, I think, about the 1990s. That is Hanwell Broadway in Ealing, West London. And I was born in Hanwell, though it was a few years after this. Now this is one of the famous Swansea Mumbles trams. The Swansea Mumbles Railway was actually the first passenger carrying railway anywhere in the world, horse driven at the time. That is a convict ship. It's the world's last remaining convict ship, I think. It's not the same one, but my, a several times back great uncle was convicted and transported to Tasmania, where his descendants still live. Getting there now. Dad was a car mechanic. And my oldest Clark ancestors were, well, I know they were mariners, they were seamen, and where they lived was a fishing community, so I fancy they might well at least been involved in fishing. That's Hever Castle, childhood home to Anne Boleyn, which I visited with my youngest daughter and my son-in-law. Now this, I was thinking, is there a method of transport I haven't drawn yet? And hovercraft came to mind. Sadly, I've never been on one myself. Not yet, anyway. Old London again, and Old Ealing again, in fact. This is Ealing Broadway. Nearly there. Now that's Heathrow Airport. Back in the days, probably before I was born. And our last picture is St Fagans Open Air Museum, which I visited recently with my daughter and son-in-law. And that's the book. Thank you for looking. Join me again.